Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharanendra Vishesha Shunyavadi Pastatadesha Talavij Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaur Bhaktivinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 4, Chapter 18, verse 21. Yaksha Raksamsi Bhutani Pisacha Pishatashana Bhutesha Vatsa Rudu Kapale Shata Javasama. Then the yakshas, rakshasas, ghosts, and witches who are habituated to eating flesh transform Lord Shiva's incarnation, Rudra or Bhutanath, into a calf and milked out beverages made of blood and put them in a pod made of skulls. There are some types of living entities in the form of human beings whose living condition and edibles are most abominable. Generally, they eat flesh, and fermented blood, which is mentioned in this verse as Kshata Javasa. The leaders of such degraded men, known as Yakshas, Rakshasas, Bhutas, and Pisachas, are all in the mode of ignorance. They've been placed under the control of Rudra. Rudra's incarnation of Lord Shiva is in charge of the mode of ignorance in material nature. And the name of Lord Shiva is Bhutanath, meaning the master of ghosts. Rudra was born from between Brahma's eye when Brahma was very angry at the four Kumaras. Okay, so of course, as Prabhupada explains in the purport, that Shiva is in charge of ignorance. Anger also is born from ignorance. And when Brahma got angry, then Shiva was born. Of course, he's eternal, but he manifested in this material world through ignorance. He's in charge of the mode of ignorance, and the ignorant entities like the Bhutas worship him, and they're his followers. So it appears that Shiva is a very degraded personality, but actually he's a form of the Supreme Lord. Sometimes, of course, a jiva can take the role of Shiva, but generally he's actually non-different from Vishnu, an expansion of Vishnu. But there's also a little bit of a difference. Vishnu, when he manifests in this world, is in charge of Sattva-gun, and he maintains things. Shiva, when he manifests in this world, then he destroys things. He's in charge of Ahankara and all these things associated with ignorance and Tamagun. So it appears as if he's contaminated by Tamagun, but our acharyas also make it clear that when he is an expansion of Vishnu and he appears in this material world, he is actually not contaminated, but it may appear like he is. So we should be very careful that we do not offend Shiva and look at him with disgust. He is simply doing a job which is being entrusted to him by the Supreme Lord. And he associates with these beings, and he's quite closely associated. So it appears as if he is touched by that ignorance, but he is not. Similarly, we can say that Vishnu also enters into all jivas, including the demons and all other creatures who may have disgusting habits, or into human beings who are tamasic. But we never say that Lord Vishnu gets contaminated by these beings, even though he's there. So Vishnu has that power to pervade everywhere, and he is not contaminated. So Shiva also is a form of the Lord, and though he enters into this universe and associates with tamasic beings, etc., he maintains that power, and he's not contaminated. So we see in Nectar Devotion in the southern section, there's an enumeration of the qualities of Krishna, but in doing so, Rupa Goswami also enumerates the qualities that are common with jivas and the qualities that are common with Shiva and with Vishnu. In other words, Krishna manifests 50 qualities which appear to a small degree in other living entities. But of course, Krishna manifests these qualities in full. Then there are 5 more qualities that will manifest in Shiva, not in the regular jivas, and also manifest in Krishna and Vishnu. And then there's more qualities which will manifest, and 5 more qualities which manifest in Vishnu, which are not manifested in Shiva, and 4 qualities that manifest in Krishna and don't even manifest in Vishnu. So, where we say that Shiva manifests 5 qualities less than Vishnu, so it looks like he's kind of like a jiva, but not a jiva, is not the Supreme Lord, whatever. But actually, he's simply like Krishna manifests 64 qualities and Vishnu manifests 60 qualities. Then we'll say, Vishnu is not Supreme Lord because he has less qualities. But no, he is Supreme Lord, but he's manifesting less qualities. So Shiva also is Supreme Lord, but manifesting 5 qualities less than Vishnu. So we classify him differently for that reason only. But he's actually not like a jiva who has overcome with ignorance and takes a material body. So Shiva is not like that. So he's not an infinitesimal particle of consciousness like millions and millions of jivas who are conditioned by material energy. Well, Shiva is not like that. He is in another category like Vishnu. But why do we distinguish Shiva from Vishnu? Why? Because of less manifestation of qualities. So we distinguish Krishna from Vishnu because of absence of 4 qualities. So we distinguish Shiva from Vishnu because he has minus 5 qualities. So there are certain things even though he is Supreme Lord, he does not manifest certain activities like producing all sorts of avatars, etc., or creating the material world. So Vishnu does this. Shiva does not do this. So in this sense, there is some difference there. I think Jiva Goswami compares Shiva to Vishnu in the sense that they are both like deepas. And of course, one deepa is the Adipurusha Krishna. So he's like the first deepa. And then we light other deepas from that. So these are like the Vishnu expansions. There's the Adi, that's Krishna, and then we light all the other deepas, lamps. And then we have a lamp with we put a glass around the lamp to protect it from the wind. But then the glass becomes blackened with the soot. So the light does not come out so much. So Shiva's like that. He's the lamp, but manifestation of quality is significantly less than those of the other lamps, which don't have the glass and consequently the soot. So the qualities that manifest are slightly less. So that is the position of Shiva. But at the same time, he is not a jiva, an infinitesimal small particle of consciousness who can get covered up by Maya. He's completely different from that. So therefore, he's not the same as the regular jivas. So that is the distinction between Krishna and Vishnu and jivas. Krishna, Vishnu, Shiva, and then jivas. So we should not disrespect Shiva, even though he does strange activities sometimes and has snakes around his neck and has ashes from the crematorium on his body. We should not criticize him. So that is the nature of Rudra. So here, some of the followers of Shiva are mentioned, the Yakshas, Rakshasas, and Bhutas, and Pisachas. They're under the control of Rudra. They worship him, and he is their master. They're obedient to him. They are his devotees. So the we see that for different types of living entities, the Lord has supplied different objects of worship. For people in Sattva Gun, they can worship Vishnu because Vishnu is in charge of Sattva Gun. For people in the mode of passion, Rajas, people worship Lord Brahma, who's in charge of creation. And for people in the mode of Ignis, they can worship Shiva, who's in charge of destruction, which is in the mode of tamas, or ignorance. So the Lord supplies worshipable objects, worshipable deities for the people in the different modes. So people in the mode of ignorance get attracted to Lord Shiva. Others become attracted to Brahma in the mode of Rajas or passion, and others become attracted to Vishnu in the mode of Sattva. And consequently, Vasudeva wrote 6 Puranas, 6 for the people in there were 18 Puranas, 6 for the people in the mode of tamas, 6 for the people in the mode of Rajas, and 6 for the people in the mode of Sattva. So in the 6 tamasic Puranas, he tells them worship Shiva. Shiva is Bhagavan. And so people in Tamagun will start worshiping Shiva. For people in the mode of Rajas, then he tells them to worship Lord Brahma. For people in the mode of goodness, he tells them to worship Vishnu. So this is the arrangement of the Supreme Lord, and Vasudeva inspires people to worship different deities according to their modes, according to their guna. This, of course, is expanded also in like the karma khandas for people who have material desires, so let them worship devatas. But then, of course, we have the Vedas also saying, oh, this is nonsense. This is all temporary. Once you fulfill some of your material desires, you should start renouncing. And then you should practice jnana and understand you're not the body at all. Give up all that worship and strive for liberation. So, in other words, the Jnana Khanda of the Vedas is for people who are qualified with sattva, whereas the Karma Khanda with the worship and the different modes is for people in the gunas, Tamagun, Rajagun, and Sattvagun. But of course, beyond that, then we have people who are of superior intelligence, the people who are the devotees. So they don't look at the gunas at all. They're not attached to the gunas at all. And they worship Supreme Lord who is beyond the gunas. That is Krishna. Of course, Vishnu is beyond the gunas also. Or they concentrate on devotional service to the Lord, which is nirguna or beyond the gunas. So the Lord supplies all of these for different types of people with different qualifications. Now, of course, we'll see that those in sattva are in a better position because they also worship Vishnu. So they can very nicely transcend from that to worship of Vishnu purely, and then they can attain spiritual world. So anyway, this is an arrangement of the Supreme Lord, and then Shiva gets the task of taking care of the people in Tamagun. It's not a good job in one sense, just like Yamaraj doesn't control all the people in hell, and he has to punish them all. So, and he's a great devotee of the Lord also. He's a Mahabhagavata. But they do these because there are so many tamasic people in this world, so many sinful people in this world. So the Lord gives certain devotees responsibility for taking care of these people in the gunas. So that's why we have Shiva and all of those followers, etc. mentioned. And of course, they're doing very abominable activities like eating flesh and blood, whatever like this. So this is all very tamasic. But such people exist in the material world. So Bhagavatam is mentioning them all. Now, of course, why we have all these things, this whole discussion of cities, here we have the discussion of the tamasic beings, etc. Why that's there? Because there are living entities with all these different habits and qualities within the material world. They all manifest, and they are all given their types of enjoyment. If you want to enjoy in Tamagun, then ultimately the Lord through Brahma and others here, Prithu, they're supplying the jivas all these different enjoyments in the material world. Yeah? Not good, but nevertheless, the jivas demand this, so therefore the Lord supplies. Accordingly, as you desire, the Lord fulfills that desire, and you get that type of worship. Of course, you also get bad karmas, etc. But nevertheless, if you insist on this type of enjoyment, the Lord also makes arrangements for it in the material world. So therefore, we'll see from the very beginning of creation, Brahma starts creating beings. So at the very beginning, he starts creating demons, yakshas, and of course, Shiva comes out, and then the yakshas are there, and the rakshasas are coming out. The daityas like Hiranyakasipu and from Diti arise, all by arrangement of the Supreme Lord. Why? Because this is the nature of these jivas, and they need bodies for that. So the Brahma creates the bodies for these living entities. Definitely not good, but this is the material world, and it's full of all this variety of jivas. So therefore, the Brahma makes this arrangement for everyone. So after all these descriptions of the real nature of the material world, we have to get a solution to all of this. So Lord also provides that solution. So over and over, we'll see that the solution is provided for the jivas to transcend this position of all sorts of bodies with all sorts of desires, from the worst bodies like this with demons and rakshasas, even to the devatas, and even the Lord Brahma. All are material bodies. So the Bhagavatam encourages everybody to get out of this bodily identification completely. You can go for liberation, which is through jnana or yoga, but that is also condemned in the Bhagavatam as being insignificant solution, because it simply gets you out of repeated bodies in this material world. So yes, it is pure. You're beyond tamas and rajas and sattva. So in that sense, it's good, but it's also not good and actually rejected, because it's not the highest, and we get trapped into that position of liberation. So therefore, we should go for something much higher than simply escaping from our material bodies. So therefore, the Lord recommends the process of bhakti and attaining the Supreme Lord, getting a spiritual body, and serving the Lord eternally and getting bliss. So that is the solution the Bhagavatam gives to all of these problems in the material world. So we should not be too distracted by all these different descriptions. Previous descriptions were siddhis. So the yogis go for siddhis. This, of course, is a distraction for them, because they should actually go for liberation. So Patanjali says all of these siddhis are a distraction. So when you practice yoga, you will get siddhis, like the previous verses describing the Kim Purushas and others who get siddhis. But this is all a distraction. It gets you attached to the material world. So you should beware of the siddhis, and you should concentrate on liberation. So even Patanjali recognizes the dangers of siddhis. That is relatively, you say, advanced material desire. Here we see the most degraded aspects of material desire, where the rakshasas are drinking blood and eating flesh. So that's a very degraded position for the jivas. Nevertheless, some people aspire for that. So therefore, all these things are supplied within the material world for the jivas, but they're all to be rejected ultimately. So we may automatically reject the disgusting things like the entities of this verse, but we may be attracted to the siddhis and the enjoyments and svargaloka, etc. So, but all are to be rejected. All these enjoyments in the material world ultimately are rejected. The only way they can be accepted is those things which sustain our body so that we can do bhakti. Those things will be accepted by the devotees. Of course, if yoga siddhis could be used for a devotee for devotional service, fine, he will accept them. As I said yesterday, in the spiritual world, the Lord has siddhis. The devotees also can manifest siddhis in the spiritual world. Generally, they don't display them, but they could for service to the Supreme Lord. But very difficult to engage eating blood and flesh in the service of the Lord. That's very difficult to do because it's so contrary to bhakti completely. Other things we can use definitely, but definitely the tamasic things we cannot use at all. So generally we reject all of these things as being distractions. So even the cities, all this, and even the types of liberation get rejected unless there is service to the Supreme Lord. So that is the real lesson of Bhagavatam. We should rise above all of these types of enjoyments and whatever guna they're in. So more particularly, the devotees would have to be aware, or develop, should be aware of the attraction to the sattva guna enjoyments, because they know, look, well, these are very nice. We can, engage them all in the service of the Lord, but even those will become obstacles for us because we get attached to that sattvic enjoyment. So therefore, we even reject the sattvic enjoyment in favor of pure bhakti. Okay, any question there?
Krishna Maharaj, Dhanur Pranam. Thank you for the nice description today of this verse. Alright, Lord Shiva is very merciful. So why would he allow this demonic person to engage in these ghastly activities?
Well, as I said, people are in different gunas and they have different desires. The Lord ultimately fulfills their desires. Of course, there is the final result. You get bad karma also, as human beings at least. If you don't want the bad karma, you can become an animal and do the same thing, and you don't get karma. So therefore, people who really want to eat the flesh, etc., they can become a tiger or a bear or whatever, or a wolf, and then they can enjoy their flesh or whatever and survive in that way, solely on non-veg food for their whole life, and they don't get any karma for it. So therefore, there are living entities, their enjoyment in different ways, and the Lord makes arrangements for everybody. But if we're at the stage where we're human-like, as yakshas, rakshasas, humans, devatas, etc., then we get karma for it. So this is all because of the arrangement of the desires of the jiva. So the Lord likes to fulfill those desires. So to make it a little bit more spiritual, then the Lord arranges for even the tamasic people to do some sort of worship, which looks like it's ridiculous to whatever worship anything. Still, he encourages them to worship Shiva, but it has to be attractive to them. So if the object of worship for the tamagun people is a sattvic person like a devata, and he tells them to give up all your bad habits, they're not going to worship him. They'll be attracted to a person who looks tamasic and who gives them tamasic instructions. So then it becomes a little impossible to help them spiritually advance if we're just going to be in tamagun and give them tamasic things. But then Shiva's very clever because he looks tamasic, but he isn't. And then he gives them instructions which look tamasic, but actually it's there to elevate them. So though they do have bad habits and whatever, there is some restriction. And therefore, even the people in tamagun will do austerities, etc., in order to please Lord Shiva. So at least the austerity part is a little good. It's not the best, but at least they restrict themselves a little bit from their tamagun habits. So it's a compromise, of course, but it's for the hopeless people in the material world. That's what it's for. So therefore, the activities from the sattvic point of view look very bad, but from the lower point of view, it's a little alterations so they can gradually advance. Just like in the varnashram system, which is more civilized, just for human beings, not rakshasas. Then we have the people in tamagun, the sudras. And the Sudras, again, they have an inclination for sin and whatever, and they're not very intelligent, they're lazy, they're in tamagun. What to do with them? So then a set of rules is given to them to restrict them. But if we were in Sattva and we're a Brahmin and we look at the rules for the Sudra, we'll say, oh, well, how you can permit the Sudras to eat meat or whatever they do, drink and whatever. They don't have any restriction on this, or not much restriction, but some restriction, but not like the Brahmana. So the Brahmana in general cannot eat the meat, cannot drink, cannot do so many things, but then the Sudra can do that. So then you'll say, well, why the Lord does this, why he permits the Sudras to do all this? And the answer is, well, they're incapable of following those rules. So we'll have to kick them out of the whole system. But let give them a chance for purification. So therefore, there is some restriction put on all of their habits, whatever. But it's not a complete restriction like for the Brahmins. So therefore, it looks quite different. But that's the method for purifying them. Okay. Don't completely restrict them because it's impossible. At the same time, put a few restrictions on them, and gradually they get purified by that. Right? So similarly with Rudra and his followers, okay, they're given, they have bad habits and whatever, so it's restricted to some degree. Through that, they get purified. Some, of course, go to extremes, just like we see in the worshippers of Kali in the story of Jad Bharat. They were actually not worshiping Kali properly. And so for Kali got angry, cut off their heads. So, they may go overboard and do things which are not pleasing to Shiva also, which are very tamasic, and so therefore Shiva will also punish them. But if they follow the rules properly, then they can advance to some degree.
Thank you very much. There's a question in the chat box.
There's a question in the chat box. Yeah. 2 questions are there.
Yeah, okay, here. As devotees of the Lord, did Jai Vijay as demons accrue bad karma for inflicting pain on others during their time as demons? Well, actually, see, they are eternal associates of the Lord, so they are playing roles in the material world, and their curse also is a role. And it looks like they got angry, and then they get cursed by the Kumaras, etc. So all of this is not their fault in one sense. It's an arrangement of the Lord for certain pastimes. So therefore, we cannot blame them, and therefore, whatever they do in the material world also is not really bad karma, etc. It's for the pastimes, etc. And the Lord will give some solution for all of that. However, we should not think that in every day of Brahma, Lord makes this arrangement and then Jai and Vijay fall out of the spiritual world, something like that, because it would look like every day they're having to fall out of the material, spiritual world, and they lose association of the Lord. So normally, it's not Jai and Vijay from the spiritual world that take these roles, that they are big demons who afflict living entities and get a lot of bad karma for that. So that's the normal position. But when it's Jai and Vijay, they are an exceptional position. So we shouldn't think of them in the same way. We have Krishna fulfills everyone's desires, and he wants us to voluntarily seek bhakti. Then he fulfills that desire. Krishna can do anything and everything. Why not Krishna reject his material desires which are not favorable? Well, for people who are not devotees, Krishna is neutral. Krishna says, I'm equal to all beings, but I'm in my devotees in me. So when we're not at the level of bhakti and trying to serve the Lord, then the Lord is neutral and he doesn't interfere, and he doesn't one way or the other. He lets the law of karma carry everything out. And through the law of karma, if you got good karma, then the devatas are encouraged to give you nice things. And if you got bad karma, they're encouraged to take everything away from you and get the punishment of Yamaraj. But all this is like indirectly the Lord working through the law of karma. So the Paramatma or Krishna are neutral all in those affairs. They don't really interfere in that. So yes, they are fulfilling desires in one way, but it's through the law of karma actually that it happens. But through that you get the good things and your enjoyments, etc., and you get your punishments as well. So at that stage, the Lord doesn't really personally, take an interest or whatever. Only when we develop faith and we get a little devotion, then the Lord becomes very interested. And therefore, he will help the devotee advance in devotional service. Krishna says, I give you the intelligence by which you come to me. And even if you have impure bhakti, the Lord is willing to help. So therefore, he delivers Gajendra. Even though Gajendra had a mixed bhakti, he wanted to get free from the crocodile, and he offered prayers, and the Lord came. So immediately one has bhakti, even if it is mixed bhakti, impure bhakti, the Lord is willing to respond to that person. But before that, no, he's not going to exert his mercy and his special powers. But for the devotee, he's willing to do that. So as long as the jivas are not favorable to the Supreme Lord, then the Lord does not interfere with their desires. When they do become devotional, then to help them develop bhakti, he may interfere. So Bhagavad says sometimes the Lord will take away all your wealth. So that's not the law of karma operating, that's the Supreme Lord taking everything away. Why? Because if he sees it's unfavorable for your development of bhakti, then he will act. So that's the arrangement of the Lord for the devotee. He does personally interfere and do things. He gets interested in the devotee developing. Similarly, even for a person like Bharat, who got attracted to the deer and forgot the Lord. When he became a deer, because he had reached bhava stage of bhakti, the Lord did not abandon him and forget him at all. Of course, he made a big mistake and he rejected the Lord, and he thought the deer was better than Vishnu. But still, the Lord did not take offense at that, and he made an arrangement in his deer body so that he could remember his past activities. Deer cannot do that, but that deer could, because he was a devotee of the Lord. So the Lord made arrangement for Bharat, even he made a big mistake. So he was very merciful to him, and he kind of interfered in the law of karma and gave him good intelligence as a deer so he could remember his past life and then understand his mistake. So then his next lifetime, he got prema. So we can say the Lord encouraged him in this way, and even in spite of the bad circumstances, the Lord helped him and pushed him in a certain direction so that he got prema when he became Jad Bharat. So the Lord definitely helps the devotees, but to the others, let the law of karma take care of it.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Hare Krishna Maharaj, there are still two questions on the chat box.
If we're indulging in tamas activities and worshiping Shiva, is this within the Vedic system? So what is the way such worshippers rest the higher modes? Okay, so yes, this was the system. And it's also even karma. The karma kanda is like that. You worship follow the Vedas, do karma kanda, go to Swargaloka, etc. Yeah, it's permitted. And through that, you're supposed to get purified. And so therefore, Brahma Sutra says, Atata Brahma Jigyasa. After going through the karma kanda and following dharma and fulfilling your material desires, then you should realize it's all useless, and then you should take to jnana. So the whole purpose of that is to arrange for your enjoyment, but at the same time, some restrictions are there. So hopefully out of that, you will realize it's all useless. That's the whole idea, not just unrestricted enjoyment. Then it's not Vedic at all. But you do it through yajna, etc., and all rules and regulations, etc., and then you go to Svargaloka. And after you enjoy all of that, then you should realize, well, this is too much endeavor. We shouldn't be the material body anyway, and we give it up. So that's the intention for some restrictions on the lower levels, then gradually we advance. So by worshiping Shiva and following some rules, gradually we'll advance to Rajagun. And we worship Brahma, follow some rules, then we progress to Sattvagun, and we worship Vishnu. So in this way, and of course we can say also the whole Varnashram system is a progression from Tamagun to Rajagun to Sattvagun by progressing over many lifetimes from being a Sudra to being a Vaishya, to being a Kshatriya, and then being a Brahmana. So one progresses through the gunas by following the rules of Varnashram. We follow the Sudra rules after many births, then we get to become a Vaishya. We follow the Vaishya rules, then we get born as a Kshatriya after many births. We follow the Kshatriya rules after many births, we become Brahminical. And we follow those rules and we get liberation. So that's the general, it's a gradual system. So we progress from karma yoga and karma kanda, and we develop nishkama karma, and then we get to sattva good and into jnana yoga and astanga yoga and purify ourselves further. And if we're lucky, then we take to bhakti. So that's we said the gradual system. But it doesn't work in Kali Yuga, our particular Kali Yuga. Narada told Veda Vyas, writing all the Puranas like this is only confusing for people. They're not going to work. People get too attached to their immediate results. They don't have much intelligence. They don't live very long. They're always disturbed. They're very materially attached. So this system will not work. So he says, everybody just worship Krishna. So in other words, he rejects that system. Also in Bhagavad Gita, at the end, Krishna says, Sarva Dharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja. Give up all these dharmas and simply worship me and surrender. So he says the same thing in Bhagavad Gita after explaining karma yoga, jnana yoga, stanga yoga. Then he says, just do bhakti yoga. Okay? So yes, there is a system by which you can gradually advance, but not practical in Kali Yuga. So just everyone will worship Krishna. That's the solution for Kali Yuga. How does it work? If bhakti yoga is the highest, how do we get the unqualified people to take part? Well, bhakti is all powerful, and its nature is to purify everybody from every mode. So you don't have to go through the gradual process. Only qualification is you should have faith in Supreme Lord, faith in the bhakti scriptures. Then you can immediately get out of tamagun and get up beyond sattvagun. So that is the why power of bhakti, because bhakti is not different from the Supreme Lord. Karma yoga, jnana yoga, stanga yoga are in the gunas. And they're not non-different from the Lord. They are mixed with the gunas. So their powers are limited. But nevertheless, they can gradually purify you. But the process of bhakti is nirguna, and it's the Sarup Shakti of Krishna. So very, very powerful. And so it can by itself get you beyond the gunas. We see that some Vaishnava sects refuse to even enter Shiva temples, while other Vaishnavas treat Lord Shiva's expansion of the Lord and offer respects. How do we understand the differences? Well, different sampradayas will have different customs, etc. But we see Lord Chaitanya, he would go to all the Shiva temples in South India when he was traveling around, and then he would be chanting the name of the Lord there. So he didn't make so much of a distinction. But we do have even Sri Vaishnavas generally avoid, but then we have a Shiva Vishnu temple run by the Sri Vaishnavas in Chennai, so in T Nagar. So it's not that they all avoid the Shiva. And we'll see in Udupi, there's actually a Shiva temple there that the Madhvas, they do the worship there also. So they also worship Shiva. So it's according to Sampradaya. Did the devotees whom Jai and Vijay afflicted pain or on field pain, or is that also a sort of drama? Well, it's not really mentioned, but as I said, normally if they are demons, and of course they are causing pain, but as Jaya and Vijay, they become Hiranyakasipu and Hiranyaksha, then I think it's a little bit different for them, because they don't have any sin attached to them. So a different scenario for them when they are eternal associates of the Supreme Lord. Okay, is that it?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, Danat Pranam.
Oh, here's another.
I just wanted to ask one question, is that when the people pray to Shiva, are they, and Shiva has got 11, there are 11 Rudras, the expansion of Shiva. So they are praying to, the prayers go to these 11 Rudras, or how does it go? And another question is, what is the position of Sadashiv in the spiritual world? Is he also dealing with the material world over here, or is he not?
Yeah, if they're in the spiritual world, then they don't deal with the material world. So it's only the, let's say the Vishnu expands into the Purusha avatars, then he deals with the material world. But the same Vishnu is Shankarshan and Pradumna, etc. in the spiritual world, then they're not even aware of the material world. So same with Shiva. In the material world, then he's taking care of Tamagun, etc. Spiritual world, then he has nothing to do and not associated with Tamagun, because no gunas in the spiritual world at all. So he's not in charge of Tamagun there, but he's simply another form who helps serve the Supreme Lord. Yeah? So that's so for all the Devatas. In Vaikuntha, we have all the Devatas there, and they're in charge of the different directions in Vaikuntha, but they don't have material bodies anymore. They're all spiritual entities, and they're just eternal servants of the Lord there. So there was Shiva in the spiritual world also is acting in a different way. There's also another form called Sada Shiva, who's actually just the Vishnu form also. So that's also there in the spiritual world. And as far as material world, we have Shiva, he has his expansions, just like we have Supreme Lord has his avatars in the material world. So Shiva has his expansions, and he expands in different places, in Ahankara and different places and different parts of your mind, etc. So that we can say all expansions of Shiva. And of course, Shiva expands into all universes because he is Supreme Lord. He has some extraordinary powers that we Devas don't have. He can expand himself all over the place. And through those expansions, carry out his particular work of supervising the mode of ignorance. And people can worship any of those 11 forms, or they can worship the other form who's on Mount Kailash, etc. It's up to the type of worship. But nevertheless, we can say similar worship. Just as we worship expansions of the Lord, it's the same as the Lord also.
Thank you, ma'am.
How do you respond to persons who left devotion due to challenges with devotees? They say you can get Krishna outside ISKCON, but they stop chanting, but have love of Krishna and follow 4 regular principles. Well, of course, it's all up to Krishna what happens. But in any case, they should not offend devotees. They should not think negatively of them, because this is a big let's say obstacle to their progress. And of course, they should always, if they stop chanting, then what can they do? Because that's the Yuga Dharma. So they can have a favorable attitude and okay, next lifetime, they can gradually advance, but it's much slower for them if they do that. So if they simply follow regular principles, even many karmis do that, Mayavadis do that also. So it's not necessarily even Vaishnavic. So they have love for Krishna, but they should express it by doing bhakti of some sort, not just saying I love Krishna. They should also express that by activities of devotion. So you can worship the Lord, or you can hear Bhagavatam, or you can chant the holy name. So at least something you should do. Not do no devotional activities and say I love the Lord, but if it's not expressed by some sort of service, then it's just empty words.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, Dandavat Pranam. I have one question. When the associates of the Lord comes to this material world to help him in his lila, and in Bhagavad Gita in 15.6 it is told that one who has gone to the spiritual world never comes back. Not here at the end it says he never comes back. So how we reconcile with these two things?
So when it says you don't come back, that means you don't get affected and covered over by ignorance and take up a material body again. So when the Jai and Vijay come as demons, they're not regular demons anymore. It's under the will of the Lord. So therefore, after their role is finished, they go back. The 3 lifetimes as a demon, they go back. So there is no, prolonged covering of ignorance. It's all arrangement of the Supreme Lord. So in that sense, they don't really fall. This is an arrangement for pastimes of the Lord. So the not falling is there for the, we can say that in spite of the fact of falling, they don't fall. Another explanation of this is actually they didn't fall. They did and they didn't fall. This is the explanation of, I think, Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur. Yeah. So it appeared they fell into the material world. But then we see in the Bhagavatam also later on, I think in Canto 8, it's described there was a big battle between the Devatas and the demons, and Vishnu was also there. And Jai and Vijay were also there fighting against the demons. So then based on that said, Vishnu Chakravarti will say that actually they were still in the spiritual world because the Lord could not bear separation from his devotees, so they stayed there. But he expanded them into other forms who took the role of demons. Well, then they went on for 3 births, and then they merged back into the body of the Jai and Vijay again. So in that sense, they didn't even fall. So that's a way of explaining. Also, they didn't actually fall. The expansions fell. But that's a special arrangement of them.
Okay. Thank you, Maharaj, for the Dandavat Pranam. Thank you for the nice explanation for that.
Okay.
So it appears there is no other questions at the moment.
Yeah.
So we can close the
Okay. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripasindhubhyo patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo
Hare
namo
Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Bhanu Maharaj ki jai. Hare Krishna.